What is that one thing you did as a child that still gets brought up to this day? Story 1. When I was a wee lad, my family and I were at a restaurant. We were waiting an unusually long amount of time for a server. I stood on my chair, slammed my fist into the table, and exclaimed, "They're not helping us 'cause we're black." We are not. Story 2. When I was about 4, my parents were talking about Bill Gates, or someone else super rich, and I said very insightfully, "I bet he can eat at Waffle House anytime he wants to." I think it stemmed from me constantly begging to go to Waffle House and my mom always saying, "We don't have the money to eat at Waffle House every day." I just assumed money was the only reason I couldn't eat there every day. Story 3. When I was really little, I was running around in a family friend's yard. I was still potty training and had the pull down your pants part of going to the bathroom down pat, but hadn't quite mastered the find a toilet part, so I just dropped my pants and on the grass. The best part is they were taking a video at the time, so now they have a home movie of me taking it in their yard. It's been 25 years and everyone still makes fun of me for it. Story 4. My aunt's dog died when I was a toddler, and to commemorate said dog I drew her a picture that was just scribbling with a red crayon, and told her that my picture was called Blood and Bones because that's what her dog had become. I'm in my 30s and my aunt still bring it up and thinks it's hilarious. Story 5. When I was around 3 to 4, I used to try to seat people at restaurants. I also made my parents let me stand by the doors to the mall with them right next to me so I could welcome people to the mall. My mom brings it up whenever she can. Story 6. Purposefully hid in the mall at closing time because I wasn't ready to leave yet. Then nobody got to leave, because the mall was on lockdown. I was 3. Story 7. So, my parents had a nanny suite in our old house. They decided to let a family friend who was retired live in there and be our nanny rent-free. They also paid her a few $100s every 2 weeks. She was a pensioner. So, I was about 4 and she used to bring me out on her adventures. What my parents didn't know was that she was a secret lush. She used to bring me to a bar midday. The barflies found me entertaining. They would buy me ice cream if I sang "How Much Is That Dog" in the window. As a 4-year-old I found this perfectly acceptable. I got to sing and free ice cream. My parents never knew because nothing bad ever happened to me. After we sold the house and I was about 8, we walked by the bar, and I go, "That's where I used to sing for ice cream." My parents asked what I meant and I told them. They were horrified at first and asked me if anything bad ever happened, and I said no. I'm 35 and still haven't lived it down. Story 8. You and the resident bullies Jordan's in 6th grade and everybody applauds you only to find out his parents are going through a heated divorce. I see him at the bar every now and then while he brings up the fact I gave his shoes a golden shower to everybody with no backstory as to why I did it. This dude. I was about 3 years old in my mom's arms in the checkout line of the grocery store. There was a lady with darker colored skin in front of us, and in my ignorance I tell my mom that lady is dirty and needs a bath. My mom was mortified, and so am I every time she reminds of the time I was a mildly racist toddler. Story 9. I have 2. When I was a kid I couldn't say frog. I said. I was also a very clumsy child. I was running, tripped, hit the corner of a table and gave myself a black eye. My family thought it was hilarious for me to tell people mommy did it. I come from an incredibly classy family. Story 10. When one of the missionaries Mormon church asked my cousin and I who the Lord speaks through or some shit. It starts with a PRO. They said prostitute. I said, not really a big member of the church anymore. Edit, the word was prophet. Story 11. Oh, I have 2 for you. TLDR at the end. Picture it. Small town restaurant circa 1995. My very pregnant mother was craving seafood. This particular place had a seafood buffet, so she, my father, and myself go out for the evening. Everything is going well. We're enjoying our meal. I'm excited over being able to have a soda with my meal because soda is a special treat. Suddenly, my stomach is killing me. I'm in some serious pain, but I do not want to ruin the evening, so I stay quiet. Do you remember the old vinyl booths? Well, turns out that they have a really good reverberation when a little tiny petite 7-year-old girl lets out a man size. Everyone turns to look. My face is red. I panicked. I looked up at my poor, innocent, unsuspecting birth giver and gas mother. Her face goes white. The whole place just heard me pin it on her. Who would believe her if she denied it? She's obviously quite pregnant. And these things happen, right? Cue my father, practically choking from trying to refrain from laughing. His eyes are bulging and watering. His face is contorted and red. He had to excuse himself to the lobby. He could be heard laughing the entire way. She brought this up every chance she got. I totally deserved it after making her take the blame. A few years later, quite the tomboy I was. I loved running around outside, getting into trouble. One day I'm playing and end up trying to mimic a scene from AFV to see if I can succeed where the kid in the video failed. Spoiler alert, I could not. I fell. I felt my arm snap, just a bit above my elbow. I walk inside, calm as can be, and tell my mother my arm hurts. I can't lift it. She takes me to the emergency room and sure enough, it's broken. They wheel me back from X-ray into a room. There's a doctor, a nurse, and a really nice lady in a pretty dress. But my mother is nowhere to be found. They ask me how my injury happened. This is a test. Since I wouldn't tell my mom what happened, she must have sent this lady to find out. And seeing how I was doing something she had told me many times not to do, I'd better not tell her. I fell, and that's all I'm saying. They brought me a popsicle. They told me my mother could come in and see me soon. But how did it happen? I'm not telling you. I fell. You see, the particular location of the break was not a common break point for falls. It was more common a spot broken from grabbing a child by the arm, if you catch my drift. So, that's the time I got CPS called on my mom because I was afraid of getting grounded for doing something I shouldn't have been doing. TLDR 7-year-old me blames a frat boy style on my mother. Then a few years later accidentally get CPS called on her because I wouldn't tell the doctor how I broke my arm because I thought I would get in trouble for doing something she warned me not to do. Story 12. When I was 7, my neighbor had a heart attack. I felt like I could have helped prevent it because I had saw a commercial advertising Bayer aspirin and how it kept your heart healthy or something. I thought the doctors didn't know about this miracle drug. From that day on, I wrote down every medicine commercial with a brief description of what the medicine did. One day at dinner my brother was complaining his hands were dry and itchy. I ran to get my notepad and told him he should try Vagisil. Story 13. My younger sister. We were watching some Discovery Channel documentary on marine life. Anyway, at one point, she turns to my mom and said, "Did you see that?" Mom's like, "No, what?" Sister says, "On TV. The animal there." Mom asks, "Which animal?" My little sister says, "You know." And then whispers, "The octa." My sister was afraid to say octopus because she knew it was a bad word. We still talk about it to this day. To the point that I have since moved across the country and my husband and my friends all refer to an octopus as an octa-dash. Story 14. While I was potty training I would make up stories about my pee and poo about how they are a part of a royal family and they have a race on who's coming out first. To this day it gets brought up. I did a cannonball into a fire ant's nest. In Texas, yeah, it probably sucked, but I don't remember it. Story 15. So I don't know if anyone has ever been to the Bugaboo Creek, but essentially it's a restaurant with a bunch of talking animals on the walls. As a kid I went there on my birthday cause I loved animals but what they don't advertise is that for birthdays they bring out this big moose puppet on one of the waiter's arms and want you to kiss the moose. 7-year-old me did not want anything to do with this puppet, and I instantly shut down into tears yelling, "I don't want to kiss the moose." Nearly 20 years later, I am still haunted by the memory, as my family constantly reminds me of my most infamous whine, "I don't want to kiss the moose." Story 16. When I was 4, I guess I was having a real bad morning. I came out of my parents' room after I had woken up and went out to the living room where I sat down in my personal toddler-sized chair and stared straight ahead at the TV, not saying a word to my then stay-at-home dad who was already up watching TV after my mom had gone to work. He changed the channel to SpongeBob just for me. He then proceeded to tell me good morning, to which I replied off. To this day he still has no idea how I heard that, though he assumes he heard my mom say it to him during an argument they were having. He tells that story to anyone he gets the chance to tell. Story 17. When going on long car journeys we would often have to use hillside routes and the like rural Ireland. When going over a steep hill at speed it always gave a funny feeling in my stomach. As a child I proceeded to shout with utmost determination, "Dad, my willy is scared." They tell everyone this story. Story 18. When I was like 10 I asked my little sister to hold my taco up because I needed to put some sauce on it, and because it was round at the bottom it would just fall over. My family refuses to buy anything other than the flat bottom shells now. I'm 25 and my parents bought me dinosaur-shaped taco holders for Christmas this year. Story 19. You get meningitis at 13 months but fully recover with no side effects. And your mom won't shut up about it for the next 36 years about lucky and blessed you are. Story 20. My cousin and I were in 4th grade together, specifically the same class. Well, I had gotten angry at him for something God knows what. Neither of us remember, which led me to announce to him that our cousinship was over. I still have no idea where that came from and I've never heard the end of it. Story 21. Had to write a story about something that happened to our family in the 4th grade. Decided to write about the time Dad felt an earthquake while he was on the toilet. It ended with, "Dad still did a poo but instead of hard it was runny." Gets brought up at least once a year. Story 22. I ran away from high school because I got into a fight with one of my friends. I ran the whopping distance of 50 meters and hid behind a tree for a few hours. Police and fire brigade were searching for me. This still gets brought up to me. Story 23. My grandparents were flying back in from overseas, but their flight got delayed. I was about 6 at the time and a massive The Lion King fan. I decided to provide some entertainment for my family, so I got up on these half walls that were in the center of the airport and just started singing at the top of my lungs. IV got a lovely bunch of coconuts with some pretty elaborate dance moves, including golden spirit fingers. My parents couldn't stop laughing, and neither could everyone else in the airport. Haven't lived it down. Story 24. I sat down on the ground while walking on usual route home and wailed, "Why must we always go this way?" Young me had it right. Variety is the spice of life. Story 25. Running out into the cornfield behind my house with a butterfly net because I believed it when my parents told me they saw a rattata run into it. I didn't give up till 5 hours later. Story 26. I accidentally hit my little sister in the head with a hatchet. I was like 6 and helping my dad in the garden. Little sister jumped out to surprise me. Oops, 12 stitches later we were cool. Story 27. When I was around 5 or 6 I asked my mom if she'd still love me if I were a squirrel. She obviously said yes, but this upset me apparently because I was in hysterics for the next 20 minutes screaming, "But bears eat squirrels." It's something my mom loves to tell weird estranged relatives at parties. That, and the time I broke my sister's nose with a plastic Barbie Pegasus toy. Story 28. I was the 9th caller and won a backstage pass to meet Michael Jackson on the Bad Tour, but the concert didn't end until midnight and I had a big test on Huck Finn the next morning in middle school, so I passed up the chance because I needed my pre-test sleep. Now everyone makes fun of me for passing up the chance to meet a legend. Also I could get some shut-eye before a meaningless test. Story 29. I had just watched Tarzan as a kid. We were walking through a construction kind of zone. This was the mid-90s, and I jumped up and grabbed what looked like a power line and proceeded to do the Tarzan yell. My father assumed I was being electrocuted and tackled me off the line. I then got my beat for being stupid. Story 30. Ruined my parents' wedding in the eyes of the minister lady. I was 3 or 4 when they married. I'm lightly autistic and I have very, very bad ADD. My parents only married because they wanted to make sure my dad would get custody if something ever happened to my mom. They wanted it to be a pretty chill wedding, short and quick. Sadly, my mom is officially Catholic and so got married in a church, and some church lady no one knew wanted to make a big deal out of it. So she wanted to give a long speech about God or something. My parents asked her not to, but she wouldn't have it. Little did this lady realize that long speeches don't go well with hyperactive 4-year-olds with big imaginations. So she's speeching, I'm bored out of my mind on my mom's lap. We're like 15 minutes in, which is a lifetime in a kid's mind. She pauses for a millisecond to take a swig of water, and I yell out, "Bo, we're done now, it's over, this sucks." She was incredibly offended. My parents thought it was hilarious. She kept going with her speech, apparently shooting death glares. But I'm a kid, and I'm bored, and I was promised a short ceremony, so I interrupted her again by climbing up on the table, scrambling around on all fours and roaring loudly like a lion. My parents loved it, she did not. Story 31. When I was in 2nd grade, I thought I was being funny and gave my friend a piece of paper that I wrote "Eat my huge" on the entire sheet. My teacher saw, and I was sent home for the day, because I gave it to him during standardized testing, but the paper was my scratch paper I used. I got in trouble for passing answers, and then the teacher flipped it over, and then I had it. Story 32. My dad told me that when I was at his house one night, I apparently half asleep started to scratch the wall. When asked to stop, I replied, "But it itches, it gets brought up all the time." Story 33. When I was 3, I think my dad brought me to a travel agency to plan a trip to Disney World. Apparently, the travel agent was this nice older lady, and she asked me if she could come with me. I said no, and pointed to, as my father described her, this drop-dead gorgeous woman 2 cubes over, and said, "But she can. It has been told to everyone, always." Story 34. Once my family and I took a trip to one of those massive indoor water park that all Midwesterners flock to in the frigid cold winters. The first day at the park, my sister and I get in line for one of those wave riding things that shoots water out super fast. So after a couple minutes of waiting, the lifeguard at the top asks me and my sister if we have drawstrings in our bathing suits, because if not we would have to put on a big overshirt. My sister says no, so he grabs a huge extra-large t-shirt that is absolutely soaked with freezing cold water. After seeing that I told him that I had drawstrings even though I did not, I wasn't really thinking about the practical reasons why it was a concern, and I'd be damned if a big floppy wet t-shirt was going to spoil my sweet wave riding skills. My sister goes first and wipes out after about 30 seconds. Finally the lifeguard gives me the nod and I whisk myself off the edge and start to ride the wave. For about 2 minutes I'm loving it. The guard is telling me how to do some tricks and I'm following his instructions. First he says throw your board in front of you and then catch it when it comes back. Sure enough, I throw the board out front and catch it perfectly, no problem. Next he says grab your board, shift all your weight and roll over. I grab my board and throw myself over and can't believe I actually did it. At this point my 12-year-old self is teeming with foolish confidence. The lifeguard looks at me and says, "Okay, final trick. Throw your board in front of you, and roll yourself over, then catch the board when it comes back." At this point I'm feeling dangerous and unstoppable, so without any hesitation I throw my board forward and spin myself over. Mid-turn the pressure of the water blows my shorts off literally, to the point where I can feel my junk in mid-air. Then I land on my other side, holding my genitals as the board comes back and smacks me right in the face. The wake washes me off to the side and I can feel 50 pairs of eyes staring at my poor little 12-year-old butt cheeks. I scrambled to try to find my shorts, but I couldn't and the lifeguard had to wrap me in towel. That day I learned many valuable lessons. Things can go from great to total dog very quickly, and always take the proper precautions when you aren't wearing underwear. Story 35. When I was about 3 I had apparently in my underwear, so in order to avoid getting in trouble I hid the evidence. I did this by going into my older sister's room, and basically waffle stomping it into the floor register. My sister was away on a trip for a week so nobody really went into her room. That was until my mom had some laundry of hers to put away. That's when she found it. For 3 or 4 days, whenever the heat would kick on it would blast fumes throughout the house. My dad scoped the air ducts with a camera, thinking he'd find a dead mouse or something. Nope, it was a turd stuck in a vent, with a toddler-sized footprint in it. Plus a smear on the carpet next to it where I wiped my foot off. LMAO, I'm 26 and that's still a regularly told story. My parents are divorced now, so I get it double because both sides still tell the story. That's my legacy. Story 36. A lot of klutzy stuff. Walked into door frames, got a tooth knocked out by a wiffle ball bat, took a different wiffle ball directly to the nose, slid to home plate in a backyard game of kickball, ate the edge of the table, broke my arm with a parked car. Tried to reach under a table to grab a fork, slipped underneath, then stood up under it, got stuck 6 feet off the ground the first time I climbed a tree, broke a toe playing soccer barefoot. A silly thing I asked. Mom explained the technical science reason for how someone gets pregnant when I was nearly 3. She explained women have eggs that turn into babies. My first question was, "Where's your nest?" Followed up by, "You said you have eggs, so where's your nest?" one of my brother tricked me into believing that Canada was pronounced Cunadia. I believed it until I was 14. Story 37. I watched Jaws a lot. I was 4 or 5 and my dad was called in for a shift at the police department he worked at as a part-time job. It was early evening and my mom said, "What do you want to do tonight, fight in skit?" My reply, "Want to get drunk and fool around." Runner-up, I was 2.5 and my mom was potty training me one afternoon. I guess she kept telling me to go potty and we would go to Grandma and Grandpa's house afterwards. After a few minutes of being told to use the bathroom, I looked her in the eyes and said, "Piss off. My mom swears I heard my dad say it. Dad swears I heard it from my mom." Story 38. When I was very young, I guess my dad used to call me Peckerhead all the time. One day while at a restaurant he called me a Peckerhead and I just started screaming Peckerhead over and over again. They were really embarrassed, I was told. Story 39. I was about 5 years old. Making this 35 years ago, I was at my best friend's house. Her room was on the second floor, we were jumping on the beds, and Shed had her bedroom window open. I jumped wrong, flew out the window, and landed on the concrete patio, head first, also partially their pit bull. He was very confused. Her mom was in the living room, sitting on the couch on the phone. She looked up, saw me, looked away, then realized what happened. Classic double take. I remember all of that, not so much anything that follows. Story 40. When I was maybe 6 or 7 or so, learning fairly basic math at school, I casually asked my mom what year she and my dad were born. She replied with, "We were born in 65, honey." I sat there for, like, ages, thinking about this and what it meant, and after a while I asked Mom, "Did you mean 1965 or 1865? It was a difference of probably 10 years in my mind, but they cracked up, made me count to figure out the answer, and they still bring it up to this day at any number of dinner parties or gatherings. Cheers, Mom. Story 41. Went to see Jurassic Park at the cinema as a 6-year-old with my family, mom, dad, older sister. Know the bit where they're climbing over the electric fence while it's turned off, but it's about to get switched back on, when the kid starts counting himself down from 3 and reaches 1. 6-year-old me stood up in the packed cinema and screamed JUMP. Still gets talked about at pretty much every family gathering. Story 42. I once gave the family poodle a bath and afterward, it had to be shaved. I used Elmer's glue instead of shampoo. In my defense, I was 3 and who the keeps glue in the bathroom. Story 43. Embarrassing story time. Around 7 or so, noticed that when I got an erection I could make it move, bounce up and down. So oblivious to the fact not something to share, sitting next to my mom on the couch I said, "Mom, look what I can do." She looks at me like what? I point down to my crotch and there it is moving up and down. She bursts out laughing and just tells me that stuff keep to yourself, honey. Still brings it up time to time. I used to be so embarrassed, now I CSN laugh about it. Story 44. It was book week at my school and I decided to dress up as the Tin Man, which meant literally wrapping myself in tin foil. It was all fun and games until the school day started and I realized I couldn't sit, otherwise it would rip. I attempted to stand for the whole day. A few hours in, I fainted and had the school staff calling the ambulance. I was like 10. To this day I am constantly reminded of it. Story 45. Was unloading the car, needed a better grip on the kitty litter bag. Younger sister grabbed it and hauled it in. Figured whatever, I'll just grab the rest of the grocery bags while she hauls it in. From 13 to 39 I'm still the kid who is so weak his younger sister is stronger than him. Story 46. At my parents' wedding I was like 4 years old. I put my head in the backrest of a chair. It had horizontal struts and my head barely fit between them. Once I realized that I was stuck I started panicking and the whole wedding had to be paused to get me out of that chair. Story 47. My grandma always talked about the time I told her God lives in a box. I was referring to the tabernacle where the Eucharist is kept in church. She thought it was adorable. Everyone else likes to focus on the time I painted a whole room with my own. Story 48. When I was in about 2nd grade, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire had come out, and my cousin from Georgia was obsessed. She had a brand new copy, and she had brought it on a visit to us in New Mexico, and intended to read it when we were traveling. We had decided to take a 2-hour drive to the mountains, and I was pretty ill that morning. I had thrown up a few times, but I was feeling okay when we got on the road. As we approached the campgrounds, I felt sick again. And I threw up on myself, the dog, the seat, my cousin, and her brand new. I stood in line at the bookstore dressed like Hermione, copy of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. To this day, they call me Poke Monster because we called throwing up poking when I was 7, and my poor cousin was pissed. Now I just get pissed when she calls me Poke Monster, and that poor vomit-covered version of HP4 was cleaned and still sits on the shelf at my parents' house, mocking me in the grossest way possible. Story 49. When I was 3 or 4, I was waiting in line at the grocery store with my mom. I was bugging her to get me a candy bar and she kept saying no, so naturally, my response was to bite her on the butt cheek. Apparently, the guy in line behind us thought it was hilarious and starting laughing out loud. Story 50. I was running a rolled-up napkin back and forth through a candle flame. The napkin caught fire, so I threw it into a plastic Solo cup which, of course, proceeded to catch fire as well. My aunt grabbed the cup and tossed it into the sink. The charred remains of the cup with a burned napkin inside were put on an ornament hanger and is hung on our family Christmas tree every year. The shame that keeps on giving. Story 51. Not me, but my brother. When my siblings and I were little, we were doing crafts with my mom. She accidentally superglued her thumb and forefinger to her nightgown, panicked, and asked for someone to get her water. My brother ran to the sink, got his hands wet, and came back to splash the droplets at her. Yelling, "Is this enough?" It was not. Another time, we were looking through those binoculars that you have to pay for at a waterfall or lighthouse or something, and a plaque said that it was to benefit seeing eye dogs. He asked, "How do the binoculars help the seeing eye dogs?" As if he thought they were meant to look through them. The profits from the binoculars went toward training the dogs. My brother is in his 30s now, and besides his questionable political views, is an otherwise intelligent and well-adjusted person. Story 52. When I was about 5, I was at the post office with my mom. I noticed a fire alarm on the wall, probably for the first time. For some reason it was very low to the ground, like eye level with me, a 5-year-old, no clue why. I asked my mom what it was, and she kinda blew me off and gave me a quick answer which I completely understand now because I have a 4-year-old and answer thousands of questions every day. Well, her answer did not suffice, so I took it into my own hands to find out exactly what it did. I pulled it and everyone started looking around and kinda heading for the exit. Then they saw me standing there terrified. Everyone got quite a laugh out of it, and I even got to see fire trucks come. Fast forward 25 years. Now I work for the Postal Service and actually used to work in that very building. Told the story many times. The alarm is still very low to the floor. Story 53. I pooped my pants in 3rd grade and somehow smeared it on my uniform. My PE teacher had to drop me off with his scooter. Every time they see each other, he still asks my mom if I ever pooped my pants again. It's been 16 years, y'all. Story 54. This one I don't even remember, but gets told quite often. I was young, I would say around 45 years old, and I used to sleepwalk quite a bit until it finally stopped mid-teenage years. Anyways, once my parents were having a dinner party at our house. After it becomes late, the kids were told to go to sleep, but the adults stayed up. After a while they noticed me sleepwalking. There I am, 4-year-old me walking towards the dining table, and I get on it. At this stage the adults think it's funny and they try to wake me up, but before they get a chance I literally drop my pants and start all over the table. The guests were not amused. Story 55. When I was around 4-ish, I asked a man why his teeth were missing. He told me it was because he ate too much candy, then pointedly looked at the lollipop I was eating. Needless to say, it shut me up pretty quickly. Story 56. We once went to the cinema and my parents asked for 2 adults tickets and one for a child under 3 and from behind. Thinking they forgot my actual age, I shouted, "But Mom, that's wrong, I'm 4. The cashier laughed and handed them the reduced ticket. Story 57. When I was about 4, I took apart the dining room table. My parents had gotten me a toy tool set, which, back in the 80s, was simply a kid-sized regular tool. My mom left me with my dad, who promptly fell asleep. When she got home from running errands or whatever, she found me in the dining room sitting next to the pile of parts constituting the dining room table, but starting work on one of the chairs. Story 58. My sister and I stepped on my neighbor's prized flowers 2 days after 9/11 because she convinced me it'd be fun. I was 4, she was 3. To be fair, my mom has now told us that even though it was pretty terrible what we did, our neighbor was a horrid, so she kinda deserved it. Story 59. When I was 5 and my baby cousin was born, I cried in the hospital hallway that I had broken my leg and couldn't go see the baby. I was really upset that I wasn't the baby anymore, and that I should have been at the toy store with my grandma instead of in the hospital for some baby I didn't want in the family. I had apparently seen Angelica pull a similar move on the Rugrats and thought sure my plan would somehow work and make everyone forget about the cute little baby and focus their attention on my adorableness instead. I was wrong. They all just laughed at me and still bring it up almost 25 years later. Story 60. When I was 5, my grandfather died. After leaving the funeral, all 7 of my family members piled into our 7-seater car to go grab some lunch. Of course 5-year-old me noticed this and said, "Good thing Granddad died or we'd have to get 2 cars. Grandma laughed, so it was fine. Story 61. My baby brother was always a wild card. Once at church my mom got called into the bishop. My brother, about 4 at the time, had walked up to the bishop and said, "Hey Dave, we don't call bishops by their first name. You know how you're supposed to sing a hymn if you're thinking dirty thoughts. Doesn't work for me." Story 62. I was probably about 3, very dramatic, and The Little Rascals had become one of my favorite movies. At the grocery store with my mom and she wouldn't let me have something I asked for, so in my best Darla voice I loudly asked, "Are you ashamed of me?" and watched my mom turn bright red as everyone in the aisle turned around. Also when I was about 6, I had seen a commercial for a movie, can't remember what it was, where the MIL was crazy obsessed with cats and meeting her SIL for the first time, so when my uncle introduced me to his now wife, I repeated after the lady on TV and said, "You can call me now." Everyone laughed. I laughed, but the joke was lost on me until years later. I guess I watched too much TV as a kiddo. Story 63. My mum talks about me being some kind of demon child from birth, which since I already looked like Damien from The Omen sort of stuck with me one day. It's Mum, my baby sister, and I at home normal as you like. Mum's amusing sister in her rocker, and in playing with toys when Mum goes to check on some laundry outside quick. To this day she has no idea how a toddler managed to reach up and lock the door, let alone vault the kitchen worktop, move sister into sight of the windows, and sit there himself with laughter. But it reportedly took 15 minutes for her and our next-door neighbor to bribe me the sufficient amount to let her back in. Apparently what's most memorable about all of it is that a toddler who couldn't speak full sentences ransomed access to her house for shits and giggles, so naturally demon child. Story 64. If my story is that funny or interesting, but I just wanted to tell this story because it's been haunting me for years. When I was like 4 or 5, I honestly can't remember, our whole family was over for Thanksgiving, rare because most of them live in another state. and I was at the age where I would pretty much only eat waffles or peanut butter and jelly, and that was it. No way I'd be eating turkey or any of the normal Thanksgiving foods, so I asked my older sister to make me a waffle while everyone is in the kitchen cooking, and my family knew I was a picky eater, so she of course told me she would. And I go about my little kid business until it's time to eat. Cut to dinner time. Everyone gets all sat down at the table and ready to eat, and when the room goes silent for a moment and suddenly I start crying and say where's my waffle, very loudly, not in a spoiled brat sort of way, but more of a genuinely upset, I thought everyone forgot about me, and I'm a sensitive little kid who is hungry way, and of course several family members jump up to go make me a waffle because they felt so bad about forgetting, and everyone apologizes because it was so busy in the kitchen, and all was well after that, even to this day, though my parents and several of my aunts bring up how adorable it was, and used to ask if I needed a waffle whenever I went to visit my out-of-state family for the holidays, and this is when I'm into my teens, while I was mad and embarrassed for a long time, even to the point of tears, and asking then to never speak of it again when I was younger, and it was brought up so often, I realized was just a hungry little kid, so I can't beat myself up for that embarrassing moment forever, huh?